last thing I wanted to ask you about are the conflicts in Ukraine and Israel wars, however you want to describe them. What are the signals that those wars are sending to us about the future?
Well, yeah, they're wars, make no mistake about it. They're unnecessary wars in both cases. And I think if you look at the Russian annexation of Crimea, and then years later, the current invasion of the Ukraine, what I was taught early on going through intelligence school is you think of three things as you assess the enemy. You think of the weather, you think of the enemy, and you think of the terrain. And when you think of the enemy, you're thinking about the soldiers they have, the sailors, the pilots, the equipment, and that sort of thing. And you'll notice that acronym is WET, weather, enemy, and terrain. I actually now think we need to think of one more variable, and that is will, W-I-L-L, and will of the leader. Because if you were to assess the Russian armed forces leading up to that, you would say no longer are they a superpower. I would offer they're not even a great power anymore, but they are a power, and they are a nation to be reckoned with, primarily because they have nuclear weapons. But economically, they're no longer a superpower. For a variety of reasons, I don't believe that they could be categorized as a superpower. However, the will of their leader in Vladimir Putin to visualize what in his eyes ought to be that great nation, and he still has this idea of the Soviet Union and the great power of Russia in the old days. I think we underestimated, and maybe I'll speak for myself because I won't speak for everyone else. I underestimated the will of that leader to do something that makes no sense at all, and to really come to what is right now pretty much a stalemate with the Ukraine, where their armed forces that used to be something is really, in many ways, a laughingstock and a mockery. I remember about a year ago, I was watching this column that they were patrolling in, and you saw truck after truck and tank after tank lined up because they didn't even have the ability to logistically sustain those. Now, if you were to put that scenario against an American military, our armed forces, that would be a dream come true. You just have everyone lined up and target. I mean, we could have obliterated that in less than a minute, quite frankly. All right, and I'm not saying that we need to be doing that, but my point is that Russia and Vladimir Putin, in my opinion, miscalculated tremendously the fighting strength of Ukraine and the people of Ukraine, and they miscalculated our resolve as a nation to support them. And in some ways, Europe, and I know there's a debate about the European nations need to do more, and some have even said that we need to do more. I'm not here to comment on what we need to do, but I do know that I think Putin didn't calculate the resolve of the world to support the Ukraine. And I think China's watching that today, and they're realizing, wow, if we go in and take with force Taiwan, what's going to happen to our economy, and what's going to happen? What's really interesting to think about, though, is as Russia does a lot of exporting of oil, who's benefited the most through the sanctions is China, because they're able to get that oil from them pennies on the dollar, because very few other nations are buying that. So that's one part of it. As you look at what Hamas did that day as they conducted a surprise attack against Israel, again, I would offer that I know we call that day the start of this, but it really had been going on in much minor excursions prior to this. But what they did in attacking innocent civilians, that's unforgivable. You don't do that. When we in uniform are engaged and, God forbid, lose our lives or something like that, or get injured, we at least signed up to serve and to defend our nation. And so there's an understanding that that might happen. And so as Israel and the IDF goes through what is now going to be tremendously challenging ground combat in the tunnels. I would offer they need to read some history about how we did this in Fallujah and how we fought an urban conflict and how hard that is, but possible. But what we can't ever forget in both cases is the will of the people, the will of the leaders to say, yeah, we're probably going to lose this fight, but we're going to do it anyways. And I think in the case of Hamas, I think what they were banking on was an overreaction by Israel and getting the public and the United Nations potentially to say, Israel, you are now the bad guy. And in some cases, we're seeing this. And then turn and kind of prop up Hamas and say, hey, you need to leave them alone and do that. I don't know that that's going to happen. I don't know that Hamas gambled appropriately in the leadership there. But in my opinion, they are a terrorist organization who have for too long threatened the livelihoods of the Israeli citizens. And unless they can do what war is supposed to do, which is return it to a political agreement, I don't see how the leadership of Israel can do anything but to continue to try and eradicate Hamas. The problem is what you're really trying to eradicate is a mindset. And I don't know how you kill that. And we've seen this over 20 years over counter violent extremist operations and counterterrorism operations. We're very good at killing, and we can take out enemies and the next bad guy and the next bad guy. But the problem is it's not just a person, it's a mindset. It's an idea. And as long as they believe that, as long as their idea continues to fester, every time we kill one, we may grow two. And so we need to take a step back at some point and say, I understand we're going to have to react to this, but what's the long-term end state here? How do we truthfully live as two separate countries, a Palestinian nation, an Israeli nation, and so on and so forth? In the case of Russia, we're backing obviously the Ukrainians, and we have said we support them, and their president has said multiple times that victory means no Russian soldier in Ukrainian territory, and to him that's Crimea, and I understand that. Just like we wouldn't want any part of America annexed, I think that's an understandable statement by him as well.